In 1987, Christy Canyon was making $20,000 a week. She was 21 years old, the most famous face in adult entertainment, and living in a mansion in the Hollywood Hills. Fans lined up for hours just to meet her. Directors fought to book her. Magazine covers, TV appearances, mainstream crossover offers, she had it all. Then one morning, without warning, she walked away from everything. No press conference, no farewell. She just vanished. The girl next door, who became America's fantasy, disappeared at the absolute peak of her power, leaving behind millions of dollars and an industry that never saw it coming. Today, I'm revealing what really happened to Christy Canyon, the story Hollywood buried, the choices that shocked the adult film industry, and the truth about the brunette beauty who defined the 1980s, and then walked away like none of it mattered. This is the rise, the reign, and the disappearance of the most famous adult film star of the Golden Age. Today, I'm taking you inside the Golden Age of adult cinema, where Christy Canyon went from unknown teenager to household name in less than 2 years. You'll discover how she built an empire on her own terms, witness the moment she chose freedom over fame, and understand why 30 years later, she's still rewriting the rules. This isn't just history, it's a story about control, identity, and what happens when you refuse to be what everyone expects. And if you love untold cinema stories like this, stick around till the end. I've got something special to share. Before Christy Canyon was a name recognized in every college dorm and adult bookstore in America, she was Melissa Bartisbanian, born in 1966 inches, Pasadena, California, Italian-Armenian family, conservative household. She played softball, loved animals, and was, genuinely, the girl next door everyone would later claim she was. Nothing about her childhood suggested fame, controversy, or the empire she was about to build. At 18, working as a typist in Los Angeles, Melissa answered an ad for modeling work. One photo shoot led to another. Then a producer saw something cameras loved, this natural, unforced quality that made her feel accessible. In an industry built entirely on fantasy, Christy Canyon felt real. And in 1984, at 19 years old, she filmed her first adult scene. Here's what made her different from the hundreds of other performers trying to break through. She wasn't trying. Watch her early performances and you see someone completely comfortable in her own skin. And the adult film industry had never seen anything like it. By 1985, she wasn't just popular, she was the standard. Other performers were compared to Christy Canyon. Directors requested her specifically. Adult video stores put her face on the window because they knew she sold tapes. She became the measuring stick for an entire era of adult entertainment. She was 19 years old, living in a world most people couldn't imagine, and making more money in a week than most families made in a year. Think about being 19 years old, suddenly famous, and everyone has an opinion about who you should be. That was Christy Canyon's reality from day one. But success in the golden age of adult films came with a price tag most people never saw. Between 1985 and 1987, Christy Canyon was working non-stop. 3 films a week, sometimes 4, personal appearances every weekend. Photo shoots, interviews, promotional tours. The demand was relentless. And saying no meant someone else would take your spot. The adult film industry in the 80s wasn't a career, it was a sprint. And everyone knew your window was short. But here's what the magazine spreads didn't show: the complete erosion of privacy. She couldn't go to a grocery store, couldn't have a private relationship, couldn't exist in public without being recognized, approached, assumed to be available. Because she'd chosen this work, the world decided she'd given up her right to boundaries. Then came the pressure to push further. As her fame grew, so did the industry's expectations about what she owed them. Higher paying roles for more extreme content. Boundaries she wasn't comfortable crossing. Producers who saw her as a product, not a person. She turned down roles that didn't align with her comfort level. She walked away from directors who didn't respect her limits. In an industry where women rarely had that kind of power, she claimed it anyway. The backlash was immediate. Some producers stopped calling. Trade publications started running pieces questioning whether she was difficult to work with, whether her attitude problem was killing her career. The message was clear: you don't turn down work in this business. You take what's offered, and you're grateful for it. But Christy Canyon kept saying no. And the more she asserted boundaries, the more she realized something terrifying: she was disappearing into someone else's idea of who she was supposed to be. The persona was consuming the person. In a 1986 interview, she said something revealing. "Everyone thinks they know you, but they only know what they've seen on screen. That's not me. That's a performance." She was 20 years old, famous beyond measure, and realizing she'd lost herself entirely. By 1987, Christy Canyon was living in a mansion, making $20,000 a week, and feeling more trapped than she'd ever felt in her life. She couldn't go backward. Everyone knew her face. But going forward meant disappearing even further into a character she didn't recognize anymore. Remember when I said Christy Canyon's real story is nothing like what you've heard? This is why. What she actually did shocked everyone. Then, everything changed. 1989. She walked away from everything. No press conference, no farewell tour, no explanation. Christy Canyon simply stopped filming. At 24 years old, at the absolute zenith of her career, with offers pouring in and her name worth millions, she walked away from the adult film industry completely. The industry was stunned. Fans flooded studios with letters begging her to return. Producers offered huge sums for just one more film. Her final scenes became instant collector's items. And Christy Canyon said nothing. She just disappeared. Here's what she was actually doing during those years everyone thought she'd retired. She was learning who Melissa Bartisbanian was when nobody was watching. She went to college, read books that had nothing to do with fame, sat in coffee shops where people didn't recognize her. She was deprogramming herself from celebrity, from the persona, from the performance that had consumed her entire adult life. For 2 years, she lived in complete anonymity. No interviews, no public appearances, nothing. And then, when she came back, she did it on entirely different terms. Christy Canyon became one of the first adult film performers to write candidly about the industry without bitterness or sensationalism. She launched a mainstream radio show talking about relationships and culture. She wrote columns, gave lectures, became an advocate for performer rights and safety in adult entertainment. She used her fame not to stay famous, but to change the conditions for people still working. And here's the crucial part. She did all of it as herself, not as the girl next door persona, not as the fantasy, as Christy Canyon, the real person, the woman who'd lived through something extraordinary and come out the other side with clarity about who she actually was. When asked years later if she regretted her time in adult films, her answer never changed. "I regret nothing. But I also don't let it define everything." She'd found the balance between honoring her past and refusing to be trapped by it. Today, Christy Canyon's influence reaches far beyond adult entertainment. She's cited by sex educators, feminist scholars, and cultural critics as a case study in agency, someone who worked in a marginalized industry but never let that industry own her identity. She proved you could be famous for something controversial and still build a meaningful life afterward, not by denying your past, but by refusing to let it be your only story. She created the blueprint for authentic reinvention. The girl next door who became America's fantasy in the 80s became something more important in the decades that followed: herself. If you love untold stories like this, the real histories behind the icons the world thought it knew, I make new videos every week, diving deep into forgotten legends and misunderstood figures. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next one.